Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Now, you know how we constantly talk about this emergency services family, and some people are like, oh, is it really like a family? You know what, it is. And if you don't agree, then you shouldn't be listening. No, I'm joking. Today's guests have made such an incredible episode because we are joined by the true emergency services family, the Sparling family. Now, this is a great example of how a community can be affected by the work of one powerful individual. And today that takes the form of Stewart Sparling. But before we jump in there, let's hear from our Firefighters Podcast family. A big thanks once again to our partner Blue Light Card. Now, Blue Light Card, they work to recognise the hard work and commitment of those individuals carrying out some of the most important jobs in our community by offering members an amazing selection of online and in-store discounts at over 15,000, that's right, 15,000 commercial partners across the UK. I strongly encourage you to head over to bluelightcard.co.uk. I mean, me and my family have been investing in some tech recently. Now, of course, we headed over to Blue Light Card like we always do to check what discounts were available. We upgraded our Sky package, got like 25% off. Bought my daughter an iPad the other month, and we got an Apple saving as well from Blue Light Card, and all of our phone contracts with O2 as well. And yeah, that's right, Blue Light Card have got us a discount, looking after us every single direction we turn. My strong encouragement is do not make a financial decision, do not make a purchase without checking out bluelightcard.co.uk. A massive thank you to William Wood Watches, a long-term partner of the podcast. Now, I'm a massive fan of this brand. I've had my Valiant watch now for probably 2 years, and I get so many mentions on it. If you're somebody that's into their firefighting history, if you're somebody that likes something classy, something sharp, but also something functional, then you've got to head over to williamwoodwatches.com. If you're an emergency services geek, and you love your fire service memorabilia, the authenticity that's behind this brand is absolutely incredible. It's all based around the owner, Johnny, and his grandfather, who was in the fire service for 25 years. He won commendations for his bravery and passed away, after which Johnny started the brand, and this is now the legacy of his grandfather. One of the really memorable acts of William Wood was actually on the 29th of June 1966, when he and 3 fellow firefighters saved 5 small children, aged between 5 and 1, from a severe house fire. And you feel that a lot when you look at the watches. For example, the straps. I mean, that's always the one that really gets the mention when people see it and they go, hey, that's such a unique piece. The red fire hose that I have on my straps are made from hose used by the London Fire Brigade. That iconic red strap comes from hose that's been in the service for a minimum of 10 years. I'm talking stuff that's getting thrown down the street at road traffic collisions, it's getting hauled up the side of buildings. You know, it's actually been in there in the thick of it. And you can see this on the markings as well. Mine's got some black markings around the edging of it, where it's obviously been impregnated with a chemical of some form at some point on an incident. You know, it's actually been out there on the front line. But I mean, they've also got it in the yellow, the green, the blue. So no matter what watch you belong to at your service somewhere across the world, you can make it personal to you. Now, the Valiant collection I've got is such a stunning piece. It's got the Super Luminova on all the dials, so day or night you'll still be able to see what you're doing, still glance at it on the middle of the night at a job and still get the time. I was also surprised when I was swimming at night the other week. That obviously works underwater as well. Even down to the small things. You glance on the side of the watch, you've got the British brass firefighter's helmet. It's been sort of melted down and carved into the side of it. It's such craftsmanship. I absolutely love it. Bigger than all of that, it's just the story behind it. It's a perfect thing for a Christmas or a birthday gift for any firefighter or lover of the emergency services. It is the perfect gift. Now, I know I keep banging on about my Valiant, but they've also got the Bronze Edition, the Chivalrous, and earlier this year they brought out the Triumph Collection. This one was an absolute game changer, a stunning timepiece. So head over and check them out. I think they're running a 10% discount at the moment, so get straight over there. WilliamWoodWatches.com, an incredible partner of the podcast. Also want to give a shout out to our media partners, the Emergency Services Times and the Emergency Services Show. We're also working in line with the Cheshire Fire Challenge and the British Firefighter Challenge. Competition's back on in the UK towards the end of 2021. All the details are in the notes for the show. And that's the names in the frames for today's episode, folks. So are you sitting comfortably? We're about to get in there with Ange, who's rapidly becoming one of my favourite people, and her beautiful children, Caitlin and Lewis. You can hear loads of different references to some resources, to some events, and also referring to the wonderful charity work that the family does. All of this is going to be in the show notes below. So snuggle down, listen in, and I will see you on the other side. Guys, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How are we doing?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
This is a really, really strange and unique episode that I was desperate to get an opportunity for, because we talk about the emergency services being like this big family full of heroes, but yours is kind of like the epitome of what I think of when I think of the emergency services, because it's a combination of heroes, it's a combination of family, there's an aspect of tragedy in there, but there's also an aspect of taking something really challenging and like a massive setback and creating something really, really powerful from it. So for our listeners' benefit, we have with us today, we have Caitlin, we have Lewis, and we have Angie. So Angie, if you could tell us what you're here sort of talking to us about today before we sort of jump into it.
Basically, I guess my role in this podcast is to talk about my husband, who was Sergeant Stewart Sparling, Treble One. He worked for Leicestershire Police. And unfortunately, in 2011, so it's 10 years this year,
God, it's 10
he was
years,
diagnosed.
isn't it? Jesus, 10 years. Oh my God.
Yeah, since he was diagnosed. So we've had 10 years of tragedy, if you like, that we've all come through. Yeah. So he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease, which is a neurodegenerative disease that renders the sufferer unable to walk, talk, move, literally breathe. Yeah, they can literally just move their eyes. It doesn't affect their eyes.
It is such a strange, horrible degenerate. Yeah. I mean, I know we'll get into the technicals of the disease, but it was such a strange... I didn't know too much about it until I started to learn a bit more about Stu's story, and I only realised that one of our close family members also struggled with it. And it really is it's such a slow and progressive thing that steals aspects of that human being from themselves and from their families. It's horrible.
I mean, basically, in 2011, we were on holiday in Fuerteventura. We were going on a trip, but Stuart had left his wallet in the bedroom. So he ran out of the taxi, went back to the bedroom to collect his wallet, got back in and said, that was weird. He said, my right foot wasn't working properly then, and that was it. We didn't even think anything more of it. Just his foot just felt strange. We got back and it got progressively worse. He couldn't, it was similar to drop foot. His right foot just wouldn't work properly.
It wouldn't roll, would it?
It wouldn't roll. No, that's right.
It's almost like he started to drag it, if you know what I mean. Not like drag it, but that it's just, if I'm hearing it right.
I remember going out one night. We went out one night into Smelton and we both had drinks, so we decided to walk home, and we were walking up a hill, up Scorford Road to home, and he just could not, and he had sort of pointy, the fashionable pointy shoes on. And he just could not pick up his foot. Yeah. And we were like, that's really not good.
Yeah, but for somebody like Stu, for people that don't know, he was a fit and active guy. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the whole family's pretty, active folks, but he wasn't somebody. This must have been very strange for him, because it's not like, I've always got a bad back or I've always got a bad this. Stu was he was an operational officer. He was a healthy guy.
He was as fit as a flea. He played golf. He did karate. He used to come home from karate, and you know how thick the gis are, the white gis. That would be wet.
Sodden, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he used to press ups on his knuckles, that type of thing, and he'd swim, he'd do weight. He was active, very active.
How much of this was his curiosity as to like, this is strange, and when did it become, I'm quite worried about this? Because he was still working at the time.
He was working, but it was beginning to affect his work. He was actually a custody sergeant at the time, and and if anything happened, and a lot of times he'd have to run, but obviously he wouldn't. Anyway, he went to the doctors who, just thought it was a nerve in his back or whatever. Went for physio, went to that type of thing. That didn't do any good. And then he started cramping as well. His body, his leg muscles just started to cramp, and they just thought it was trapped nerve, basically. So then he got referred to a consultant at the Queen's Medical Centre, and they said it was a trapped nerve in his back. Yeah. The consultant actually said, believe me, he said, I've been doing this for 30 years. He said, it's a trapped nerve between there and there.
Yeah. And they're not intentionally, but they baffle us with lots of technical stuff. They go, it's between T3 and T4, and you have lots of issues with your thoracic, and you get a prolapse this, and it's a trapped nerve that, and you're like, it's sound. And this is not, you guys have had so much experience with all aspects of the services, but we really love what our NHS and our doctors do, but they're so constrained by time, and they just need to give you an answer and get you out the door sometimes.
But it was funny because I was a bit naughty, so I went on to the Bupa website and I looked at things and everything. And, you know, when you're spooning in bed, all I could feel was his muscles, head to toe, doing that, twitching. They were like twitching. And it felt like, it was almost like I don't quite know how to explain it,
like
but anyway, I never said anything.
Some form, yeah.
But he couldn't feel it.
Really?
He couldn't feel it, no, which is bizarre. But
do you know what, though? I hear this, and for most people, I mean, I do a lot of training, and I know, I know loads of people, and Lewis does a lot of training, stuff like that as well. You get used to having a niggle. Let's call them a niggle. And we've all got our niggles. Somebody has something with their back, or somebody has something. Yeah, and I have like a restless leg syndrome where, like, when I'm in bed with my wife, my legs, they just, sometimes they jump around, and but when you hear these things, like, and we're going to hear about how bad it got for Stu and eventually how terrible the disease was, this can be really worrying for people. And this is why I'm so curious as to how did it progress, because there'll be people listening going, well, hang on a minute, you know, Sally does that, or my husband or my wife does that, and so you'd already noticed things, and Stu was he was a really proud guy as well, though. So how much of it was, you know what, I'll get past this, and I'm a fit guy, I'm young, because he was young enough, you know. Very positive, and so, you know, he just went through the motions, and at this point he couldn't go to work. Oh, really? Because he was actually walking with a stick because it was so prevalent. Anyway, sorry, just to interrupt you there. Had he started to fall then? Was he, because walking with a stick is quite a big decision for a man that's, you know. Yeah, it was just to help him, really. It was our stick. We didn't get it from the NHS or anything. It was a case of, that'll help, you know, until I get my trapped nerve sorted, whatever. And the consultant made an appointment for 2 months in the future. And he was like, I can't have 2 months off work. I don't want to have 2 months off work. But we know why now is because, you know, the symptoms develop. Motor neurone disease is notoriously hard to diagnose. Basically, we went back. The consultant asked him to walk up and down the room just in his underwear. And then Stuart said, actually, I've started to twitch. And the consultant just basically sat there. And I said, it's motor neurone disease, isn't it? He took his glasses off and he said, I'm afraid it is. And of course, Stuart burst into tears. I felt like I'd been in the stomach because we knew it was terminal. We knew I'd done more research than Stuart. He research, you know, especially for, you know, you guys, you're all pretty intelligent peeps. So you'd probably gone and done, and it can be such a curse when you've got that in the back of your mind. Caitlin, if I could bring you in, because we're talking like 10 years ago now. So for people that are unaware, yourself and your brother, you'd have still been very young at this time, and this is way before we get onto how you guys have sort of flourished in your careers moving forwards. But you were still kids at this time. So what was this like, seeing your active dad begin a really weird sorts of behaviours? It must have been quite a surreal time.
To be honest, I was only, 11, 12. So
I'm still at school.
Exactly. I was still at school. I can't really remember, to be honest. The only thing that I can remember, really, is he came home from the appointment one day, and after they found out, and they said, I've got motor neurone disease. And I was like, the only thing I can remember was I said, are you going to die? And he was like, no, you know, I'll be fine. Obviously didn't tell me because I was only 11 or 12 or whatever I was. Yeah. And then obviously they tried to keep it from me because I was such a young, tender age. I can't really remember much. I don't know if
there's an aspect of trying to protect people from it, isn't it? And I know, you know, obviously Ange and stuff, you guys have been like, let's not tell the kids anything until we know a little bit more about it. But even once you know, it's like, how do you have that conversation? Because we all know, like the C-bomb, you know, if someone says cancer, we know what that means. Even for very young children now, they're fairly familiar. But motor neurone disease, whilst, I mean, I don't want to get personal about it, but whilst I feel that's just as much of a destructive disease as sometimes cancer is, because it's very similar in the way that it steals a person's abilities from us. How do you try and communicate that? When did you, or Lewis, when did you guys start to get an appreciation for the fact that Dad was changing into a very different person, and that he may start to act a little bit differently? Well,
for me, it was sort of similar with Caitlin. I mean, I was 5 years older than Caitlin, so I was 15, 16 years old at the time. I mean, you were a different sort of age, so... Yeah, so I understood it more, but again, I'd never heard of motor neurone disease before. It's what Stephen Hawking had. Stephen Hawking suffered with, they called it ALS in America. Yeah. So obviously I knew Stephen Hawking was, story, etc., but I never knew that was the same as what my dad had. And I just remember the day of his appointment when he got diagnosed, I was sat at home. I had a couple of mates round, because I don't think I even knew he had a doctor's appointment. Okay. And I had some mates round, and Mum and Dad came home, and my dad walked into the conservatory where me and my mates were sat, and he just said, "Oh, you're right." And I said, "Oh, how did it go? Was it good?" And he just went, "Nope," and just looked down at the floor. And, and at that moment I sort of thought, oh, but I didn't really understand it still at that point. And then just watching him progressively get worse, I got used to him walking around with a walking stick, and he used to have which he'd attached to his leg, and then it attached to the laces on his shoe. So when he walked, it'd like pull his foot up like an elastic brace.
Yeah.
All of that, and it wasn't until I came home from work one night. I used to work as a waiter. I came home. I think it was about 10:30. I think Mum and Caitlin were asleep or upstairs in bed, and my dad was just sat in the conservatory having a drink, and he just literally sat me down and he just said, "Here's a book," and it was a book about motor neurone disease. And he says, "I want you to read this." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, obviously, I've been diagnosed with motor neurone disease." He said, "I'm going to die from it," and it broke my heart. I feel like I'm well enough now. I'll never forget it, and it really broke my heart. Having your dad, who's your hero, tell you that he's going to die, and there's no cure. It's a horrible thing. It really is.
Because we've all got an appreciation for the fact that we're not here. I know, man. Thank you for sharing. And this is a very close friend of mine. His son passed away about a week ago, and I thought a lot about you guys. And I always think about close friends because we all know people in the emergency services who lose someone close to them. And he was saying to me that it never changes. Losing a loved one, losing a dad, losing a son, losing anything like that. People say time heals all wounds, and he was like, "I don't think it does." You're not being horrible, but it's like, that's bullshit. I don't think it does.
It really does.
Your perception of it changes, is what he was saying. He says, but it's a bit like getting dragged down a road. The scar is still there, and you're still being pulled over the same piece of tarmac. He says it helps to talk about it, and this is why I felt really weird, taking this episode with you guys, because I think it's such an important story to tell, and the fact you've done the work with the charity is just. To publicly share your pain in that way is incredible. But like you were saying, we're all aware that we're not here indefinitely, and we get that. But it's usually so far off in the distance that we don't really get an appreciation from it. Your dad had shared that with you. What was it like? Did anybody start talking about timescales? Was there any kind of we need to do the bucket list thing, or we need to, Ange, you must have been having different conversations than the kids were having. What was your thought on? How do we manage this next year or this next 6 months or this next 2 months? Did you have an idea of time?
Yeah, it literally was a seize-the-day situation, because the majority of motor neurone disease sufferers only sort of live for 18 months. They get what's called the bulbar palsy. So basically it attacks the top half of the body first. So that's, your breathing,
which
and
is so horrible. Most people think of Stephen Hawking's of you lose your limbs and then progress. Yeah, that was very, very different. Yeah, his was
a rare form. So Stuart had obviously the lateral, so it was his arms and legs that went first.
Yeah.
So right leg, left leg, right arm, left arm. It progressively took him, but because we didn't know, again, the majority live for 5 years. 5 years. You get to 5 years and you've got motor neurone disease, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
So it's that type of thing.
Isn't that a bit like a false compliment, though? And I'm not saying like it's not a nice thing to say, but if somebody said, "Oh, hey, but you might get 5 years," is there still an aspect of and so what? Not like so what, but God, it's so hard to try and put a positive. And you guys have just been so incredibly positive in the things that you've shared. But how do you re-energize yourself to go, "Hey guys, we need to make the most of now"? What was Stu's mindset like at that time?
Stu's ethos was carpe diem, seize the day, and his was 111. So it was one life, one chance to it, one day at a time. And that's where the charity comes in.
Yeah.
And he was, out of everybody I know, I can honestly say he had the most will to live. Mm-hmm. He said, "I'm not going to die from this. I'm going to, I'm going to go toe to toe with it, and I'm going to fight." He was absolutely, adamant.
It sounds so horrible, but somebody said to me the other day when I was sharing the message of the charity, and someone who's aware of Stu, and they said, "You know what? He was kind of one of the best people to get it." And I thought it was a weird thing to say at the time, but he's such a great example of someone that can be faced with a fairly overwhelming challenge. And
he picked himself up, he dusted himself off. He went on to do lots of charity work for the actual MNDA, which is the Motor Neurone Disease Association. I mean, he raised in excess of 50 grand for them with various, we held a charity ball at the Leicester Marriott with over 300 people, police officers, and that raised 20 grand or 10 grand.
I think it was
£10,000. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah,
raffle off and stuff. Everybody was so much money.
Yeah, everybody was absolutely amazing. But then, it became apparent. I mean, I'm not trying to disrespect the MNDA, but it became apparent that MND sufferers weren't getting the equipment that they actually really needed because of cost from the MNDA. And that's why the Treble One Trust came in. So Treble One follow number, obviously. And then we started fundraising for the Treble One Trust, and I'm still doing it now in his honour, in his name.
All of you are, which is just incredible. But what I wanted to just capture, just for people, because even I'm totally unfamiliar with it, was, with all due respect, lots of charities that raise money, we do so a lot out of hope. There's a lot of pain happened, and then we're hopeful to try and make it better for somebody that might go next or somebody that might have to suffer through it. But unlike some charities where if we raise money and we come up with a cure, maybe we can fix this thing and save our loved one, but the sort of thing that Stu was struggling with, and that anybody with sort of that debilitating disease, there isn't, to our best of our knowledge, there isn't a cure. So this is why I find this sort of charity fundraising so incredible, because the person that's doing it, like Stu, there's no hope. They know they're going to die. This is so surreal. It's not like, I need a liver transplant, so let's try and raise some money and get a liver. It's nothing like that. This person is not, they're not going to live. So it becomes all the more selfless that with limited time, he spent a lot of it obviously with you guys, but to spend so much time doing things for people that will never ever be able to say, they won't be able to do it. There's no way to say thank you for it. I just find it so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we struggled so much to get the equipment he needed. A simple piece of equipment makes the world of difference to somebody that that can't move or whatever. So that's what meant the most to him. If he can help others, I mean, all of our donations are £1,000 plus because of the size of the equipment and whatever. But it was so important to him to help people like him that were struggling. And a lot of people haven't. A lot of people are older. They don't know the system, so they weren't as lucky as we were, because we had a friend that worked at the local surgery. He had a police officer friend who there were so many people that could help. Yeah, but a lot of people
that wanted to help as well. Yeah, and you guys were not. I don't want to say lucky, because lucky is like a bad word, but because of Stu's career and because of how this is kind of a weird thing. People go, "Oh, it's all right for so and so because they already knew lots of people," and you're like, "Well, hang on a minute, yeah, but." They knew lots of people because of the person Stu was. He didn't live his life with a hope that if he gets a horrible disease, he'll be able to leverage all of these connections. He was already the sort of member of the community that just over-delivered on everything that he did. So how did Stu's career start? Because when did you first meet Stu, Ange? Come on, give us the romance story.
Well, I met him in the early 90s. Yeah. And it's funny because it was a bit of a one-sided relationship, but he liked me, but I was a bit like, because he was a bit younger than I was, but because he had an older outlook, because his dad died when he was 17, so he was quite a mature guy stage, and so, but the age difference did bother me. But we were together for 25 years, so it wasn't a problem.
So he didn't do badly, did he? Were you not in the market for a toy boy though? Because my wife is, my wife's over 10 years older than me, and some people sometimes they're like,
it was 7 years. There's 7 years difference. And, I think, I've got my mum's genes, so I don't think I quite look a lot older than him. Although I think you can cut that.
No, we'll leave that in there. Don't worry. I know when I said I need some photos of you guys. I was like, there's some great photos of Angie out there.
We literally it just progressed. After 4 years, we got married. Then Lewis came along, and then Caitlin came along. We were blessed. We were blessed because we were happy. And don't get me wrong, the marriage wasn't perfect because, he's a policeman for a start. So, notoriously they're hard to live with because of shifts and one thing and another. But I'm quite laid back, and I'm not a nag, believe it or not. So I think that's what helped. Sorry, I didn't nag him.
No, I think people forget how difficult it is to be the family or the spouse or the partner of somebody in the emergency services, from shift work to the conflicts that we get, especially as a police officer living in his own community. It can be, and especially as he was doing it, in the 80s and the 90s, that was probably a really difficult time to be a police officer, to be honest.
Yeah. 94, he actually joined in 1994. He was a special for a start. He was too young when he first applied, so he didn't in first time, and that's when he became a special to get some experience behind him, and then he sailed through, and he was dedicated. He was a great cop, and I tell you, he was a really popular guy.
I know he was.
And Lewis. My poor Lewis, he's got his collar number. He's got big shoes to fill.
I know. I felt a massive pressure of that. I mean, Lewis, I did want to ask you, what was it like growing up with a dad who was a cop? Because I think that's quite a strange thing, especially somebody like your dad who was so well known in the community. Does it kind of, because we're all a bit mischievous when we're younger, did that kind of have an aspect of, oh, well, Lewis's dad's a cop, so we can't really do X, we can't do Y, we can't do Z?
A little bit. It was strange in school because a lot of people in school didn't really like me because my dad was a cop, which I thought was stupid.
It's so much stupid and unfair. It is unfair.
It is, they just thought you were a snitch, you'd get them in trouble, this, that and the other. It wasn't the case. I actually, growing up through my early teens, I was a bit of a rebel. I rebelled because my dad being a police officer, I had to keep myself, in line.
I imagine it made you want to do it more than anybody else, to be fair.
Yeah. I didn't, I wasn't like breaking rules and committing crime and stuff. But, I just rebelled. I went out. I started smoking. It was a cool thing to do. Drinking down the park and stuff. But nothing major. But to my dad,
well, let's not forget as well, for all the good values and morals that Stu's tried to instill in you, you are still Angie's son as well. So there was obviously going to be the rebellious side going in there.
Of course, yeah, and everyone has. For me personally, I had the best childhood and teenage years. My dad's van. I told toward the end before my dad passed away. I told him the majority of stuff I got up to because I didn't want to keep anything from him. Again, it wasn't like committing. I wasn't that bad because obviously he could get in a lot of trouble if I was out there and stuff. But it was good. I felt proud. I felt very proud, it was cool back in school, your dad's a police officer, it's cool. I had stories to tell people, my dad had come home and just talk about his day at work. And to me, as a young child, him saying that, I had to go on a blue light run and, chasing after people, it was just, it was like adrenaline pumping for me. It sounds silly because he's telling me a story, but to know that my dad was doing that, it was amazing. 100%, it really was.
100%. I mean, I know you've now got a really unique perspective because you have been in the job and doing it. And, we all know that sometimes a blue light run is a pretty mundane thing. But nonetheless, these stories they're not all tongue in cheek. We really do go to some fairly harrowing stuff. And like you say, your dad in the 90s, he was around during a time where, no different than now, really. There was lots of challenges, domestic violence. There was a lot of drug use going on in the area. So he really was quite a significant part of the community. But he got his really horrific disease. All this started happening around when you were like 16, 17 years of age, weren't you? Now, had you already started to begin to flirt with the idea of becoming part of the emergency services? Because for anybody that doesn't know, what do you do now for a living?
So now I'm a police officer. I've been a police officer for the last 3 years, and I've got my dad's collar number, but we'll go into that in a minute. I'd always sort of grown up thinking and knowing that I wanted to be a police officer just because of the stories. It's a good career to have. It's a brilliant career. It's like any job. You have your good days, you have your bad days, as I'm sure you can agree.
Yeah, man.
But it's just a rewarding job. From when I can remember, really, it had always been in the back of my mind that that's what I wanted to do when I was older. And then I became a police community support officer for 18 months beforehand, because at the time I wanted to join the police. There was a recruitment freeze because of funding, etc. So that sort of opened my eyes, and it was a bit of a gateway sort of thing into the police. And then I was fortunate enough
Did you never have aspirations to become a firefighter? I just want to throw it out there, mate. Or did you not allow your standards to drop that low? Or
I did that. I've always said if things didn't work out for me in the police, or if I didn't get into the police, I would genuinely like to try and get into the fire service.
Oh, mate, I think that's like a backhanded compliment, surely, but I'll take it. But nonetheless,
no, honestly,
the worst case scenario, if everything goes to rat hell, then I'll go and join the fire service.
No, I didn't mean it like that.
No, I know.
Again, the fire service excited.
It is.
It is.
We don't have to, mate. We don't have to face the challenges you guys face. I always say to people, look, the fire service we're quite soft and cuddly in ways because we only go to places where people want to see us. Do you know what I mean? Wherever we show up, people want to see us. That you guys have to go to some really horrific stuff. You go because somebody's struggling, somebody needs your help, but often because there's somebody there that doesn't want you there, and this is the harsh side of the reality of what you do.
Massively, definitely. There's the amount of abuse we get. It's unbelievable. When I was a kid, I wouldn't dare speak to a police officer how the youth of today talk.
It's just horrific. I do love the fire service, and I wouldn't necessarily want to do anything else. But I think part of it is as well is because I'm like, dude, being a police officer is hard. That looks like it sucks. I mean, some people are so unappreciative of what you do, and I know we've been really appreciative of their NHS and what they're doing. But you guys have been out non-stop during the pandemic as well. It's a really challenging time. So sorry, I interrupted you. So you first started getting into it, and you applied, but there was a freeze on recruitment.
Yeah, so I became a PCSO, Police Community Support Officer, for 18 months, and as I said, it gave me an insight into the job. You work alongside police officers out and about on the beat and stuff. And then, whilst I was training to be a PCSO, I applied to be a police officer because the application process came out, and I was fortunate enough 18 months later to join. What
was the timescale on this with your dad? Just to capture that as a timeline for us. Was your dad? So
what is into like when he passed away, and then so he passed away in June 2015. And then I became a PCSO in September 2016, and I did that until I did that till March 2018.
That must have been so tough for both of you, but because I imagine you'd already shared this ambition with your dad, and you'd started to talk about, I want to do this, and he, just the natural mentor comes out in you, not alone being a father, but that natural, oh mate, you want to think about this, think about that, go and put your name here, put your name there, do a bit of volunteer work. I bet there's so much of him that must have wanted to be there for so many reasons, but that must have been such a weird thing to want to share all of those things. And I know you'd have shared them all with your mum and your sister and stuff, but to be able to share that story with one of the biggest mentors you've ever had and not have that opportunity, because it's always that 18 months to 5 years. How long did your dad manage to wrestle with the disease for?
So he was diagnosed in 2011 September, but we believe he had it a year before. So realistically, we think he had it from 2010. We're not too sure sort of when it started. Yeah. So he had it from 2010 to 2015, so 4 to 5 years.
So he really did max it out anyway. He did.
He made the most of his life, even when he was completely disabled. He couldn't move his legs and walk. He had wheelchairs, specialised wheelchairs made for him, which were expensive, but through fundraising and stuff and the generosity of people, it was incredible. The family, friends. He managed to get these specialised wheelchairs. He had 2, and they just gave him that freedom of being able to go out and about, off-road. They were like off-roading wheelchairs. They were a brilliant piece of kit. Honestly, it just gave him that freedom. Because we lived near a country park, was going up the hills, through the fields, and it was effortless, and he absolutely loved it. And see that smile back on his face meant the absolute world. It really did.
It must have been a really weird side to be able to share with your dad, because whilst you really, admired him for the job that he did, you're being the nature of a shift worker and emergency services, you'll know yourself, you do spend a lot of time away from home. So whilst we would never want the gift of spending more time at home to be the result of something as horrific as it was, you were at a really pivotal age to sort of grow a lot closer to your dad. What was that like, and did you see a different side of him at all? As things kind of got worse, but also he was home, and he'd never really been home before.
He was, growing up, he's missed out on so many Christmases, birthdays, because he's had to work. He did his best to take them off, but as you know, working shifts,
you've got to take your turn, mate. You've got to do it every now and again. You've got to do Christmas Day, haven't you?
Fortunately, you do, but it's just one of them. Hopefully, one year you do Christmas, the next year you don't. And it was nice to have him at home. And I did see a different side to him. It sounds stupid, but I just feel like I got to know him a lot more, even though he's my dad and I know him. I got to see a side to him that I didn't really see. And at the same time, it was upsetting great. And because he couldn't go to work, he loved his job. He absolutely loved it. And because he couldn't go to work, and because his body was, just shutting down on him, he used to get so frustrated with the smallest of things.
I was about to say frustration and anger, because he was such a fit guy, and he wasn't like overly proud. He wasn't like ashamed of asking for help, but having to ask for help now for some fairly mundane things where he must have just felt like, this is just ridiculous. How can I not do this myself? I don't want to ask my flipping son to help me open the drawer or help me put my pants on. Do you know what I mean? That must have been crazy.
It was heartbreaking. He was full of dignity. He was such a dignified man. He used to do everything. He was like a house husband. I don't know if I can say that. He used to love cleaning, cooking, ironing. He used to love doing all of that amongst working. He was just a proud man. And towards the end, for the last couple of years of his life, it was like me and my sister, for me as well, I think she'd agree. It was just like paying him back for him bringing us up as a baby. Having to do everything, feed, give drink, cigarette, dress, take to the toilet. We had to do that. Yeah. And for him, that was heartbreaking. He hated it, not because doing it wrong or anything, but just because it's something that we as people take for granted every single day. Just like being able to put food on your dinner plate. He couldn't do that, and it was horrible to see. It was upsetting to see him get so frustrated.
I mean, Caitlin, I wanted to ask you as well, because you were a really, obviously the youngest of the family, and you're obviously a young lady at this time, going through all your own, we're not going to do anything personal, but you're going through all your all sort of own crazy personal changes there. How much did this force you to, not that you weren't mature, but force you to grow up at a time when you just wanted to kind of be a kid, but you also wanted to help your family, help your mom, help your dad, help your brother? But that must have been really weird, because you were, like I say, you were 11, 12 at the time.
So I was 11, 12 when he got diagnosed and everything, and it did force me to mature quicker than I really should have. But it wasn't always a bad thing. Like I didn't have the same childhood that most people would have, or teenage years, should I say. Still wouldn't change it for the world. It's taught us so many things as a family, and it's got me where I am today.
I wanted to say, because you've got a really just share there. Sorry, at that sort of moment, double click on what career did you end up pursuing?
I'm a paramedic at the moment.
You couldn't write it. It's amazing.
I work for England Ambulance at the moment. I became qualified at 20 years old, qualified paramedic at 20. Started practicing properly at 21, and I absolutely love it. And I feel like if I hadn't have gone through what I went through at such a young and tender age, and because it shaped me to who I was or who I am now, I don't think I'd be where I am today. I just think my life would be so different.
I often say to people that some of your greatest strengths, if you look closely, they often sit right next to one of your biggest scars, if you know what I mean. So one of yours, and I say scar in an affectionate way, you've had to go through something so incredibly painful that now what you value most has come from that void of having to see a loved one go through it. So it must give you a tremendous amount of empathy and sympathy versus, not you better or worse than any of your colleagues, but it must give you such an incredible lens to see some of the, I mean, what you guys do is really challenging.
Yeah, considering obviously I went through it myself, like you say, I can sympathise with families, and I can really not feel like a connection, but I can really relate to the situation. And when my dad passed away, I did suffer with my own mental health problems. I'm sure it's a normal thing. It's like with the mental health jobs that we go to, I can respond to those. I know that I can relate to them, and I can say from the bottom of my heart that I can share my experience with patients, and it just builds that connection with a patient. Like if someone, it just makes it stronger. If that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And it changes the way that you look at life and you look at the job, because you've been there and you know what they're going through. Really.
Does it fill you with a certain aspect of, I mean, there's so many places to go there, but I wanted to say anger, because you were at an age where most people are worrying about wearing the right thing to school, or my makeup's this or my makeup's that, or she or he doesn't fancy me or something like this. Was there ever an aspect of, are you fucking serious? Do you know what I mean? How dare you worry about such insignificant crap, which is not insignificant. We say that with people with respect, but you kind of wanted to have those. You'd have killed for those problems. To have things like that would have been an absolute blessing. But was there an aspect of, well, I don't want to be selfish and talk about my problems when, you know, mum and dad and Lewis and everybody's going through some fairly harrowing stuff? How did you, I mean, obviously it did spur itself out in different aspects that you struggled with, and I thank you for sharing that. But how did you navigate that? Did you reach for help in the family, friends, professionally? How do you think, and what advice would you give to somebody? Because I'm sure thousands of people go through that.
So, growing up, I was never an oversharer. I always kept things to myself. I kind of like bottled things up, which is absolutely the worst thing to do. In the job that I do now and like learning and all the training that I've done, the best thing that you can do is just talk. I know you might not want to, whether it's to a friend, your family, your parents, you know, helpline, if you've got the Samaritans and stuff like that. It's the best thing to do, because the more you bottle it up, the more you're just going to work yourself up in your mind, and it'll just, if you bottle it up, it's just going to eat you up from the inside out, and it's just not, just talk.
Is there a big thing about signposting there as well? Because, I mean, you guys, I mean, you're professionals at it, so you know what you're doing, but some people feel scared about asking or even telling somebody about something in case they don't know what someone else is going to say. Because some people are like, oh, I don't want to ask Caitlin about her dad because it's obviously really bad and I don't want to upset her. When really, if they're honest, they're scared about what you might say. If they said, oh, Caitlin, you know, how you feeling about your dad? If you're like, I feel terrible, I want to kill myself, they'll be like, oh, Jesus, what am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to say now? Yeah. When for a lot of people, that's okay. That's okay if Caitlin says that. It's just then a case of being able to signpost and support, and sometimes just being able to say it sometimes helps more than anything else. But how do you deal with that in your role now? You know, when you talk about sharing it, do you ever feel that people are scared to in case of what might come out? Did you ever share it with your friends? Did you ever talk? Did you ever talk to your friends about what was going on with your dad?
I did talk to some friends, like I say, because my life was so different to everybody else's. I felt like not a lot of them could relate to what I was going through.
I imagine none of them.
I did have a lot of close friends that I could talk to, but they didn't truly understand what was going on. I spoke to my mum and my brother, but like I say, I bottled it all up and I didn't really talk. I had counselling during school as well.
Okay.
I tried that, but personally, I didn't get on with it. I didn't. Because I feel like with counselling sessions, you feel absolutely fine, and then you go and make yourself upset for an hour a day in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And personally, for me, that didn't work. It might be different for other people. And I was too young. I was only 13, 14 at the time. The thing that I say to people from the experience I've had is admitting that you need help is the first step. It's the best step that you can take, and it's the biggest step to take. Admitting that you need help, and then that gets the ball rolling. You know, you might feel scared to ask people, or you might feel scared to talk about it because of what people might say, like you said, but you know, there are people out there that do the job to help you.
And also, that, like you said, that asking for help's the first step, but knowing that the first place that you go might not be the best place. I mean, think of it as like fitness is an easy one. People go, oh, I need to get fitter and healthier. Oh, you should go to the spin class. And people are like, I hate spinning, I'm not going to go to a spin class. Like people said to you, oh, Caitlin, you should go to therapy. Well, maybe you try that and it doesn't work, and that's totally fine. Know that everyone's going to find the thing that works for them, but it might not be the first place, it might not be the second place, it might not be the helpline, it might not be the Samaritans, it might not be group therapy, it might be one-to-one, it might be so many different ways. I think people hear mental health and they feel like they should know the answer. They should go, oh, you need to go and see this person. This person's going to fix it for you. They're going to fix everything. Well, not necessarily. You know, it's more of trying to find a process that works for you. And fitness is always easier because it might be like, whatever, eat more, eat less, go walking, go swimming. You know, not everybody's got to go and flipping lift weights. Not everyone's going to enjoy that way of dealing with, because mental health is, you know, similar to physical health in ways. It's knowing what works for you. Some people like to talk, some people like to bottle it up, and it's knowing. As long as you've got a method that isn't hurting you and isn't hurting somebody else, that must have been a difficult one to balance. Was there ever a thought of why me, or you know, I don't want to have to go through this because it shouldn't be my responsibility to have to deal with this? Your parents, with all due respect to your dad and everyone, you know, you want your parents to be there for you, and the tables are turned, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating growing up because a footballer when I was younger, so me and my dad used to go football together and he used to take me out. And then as he kind of got more poorly and in the wheelchair, it was kind of like you see other people and you think, oh, why me? Why did it happen to us? Like, what's happened in our lives that's made this happen? If that makes sense, like, what have we done wrong? Yeah. But then why does he deserve it? Why do we deserve to suffer as a family? Like, we're a good family. He's a good man. He was a good man. But then looking back now, you can't really think like that because it's just life, isn't it? Life stands for everyone.
Yeah.
And you can't change your way of life.
It's so hard to say that to them when they're in that moment, though. You know, like you say, when your dad's on the sideline and he's in the wheelchair with the blanket trying to keep warm, and he's there. He wants to give you his support, and he is giving you his support in the best way that he can. But you're kind of feeling like, why? You know, just to paraphrase you, really, why me? Why can't my dad just run out into the field with me? Why can't he do that? And then when you see your friends getting angry at their parents, and you think, you know what? I'd switch in a second. You've no idea what we're having to go through. One
thing I do say to like friends and like patients, when they're like, oh, I hate my parents, or they've done this or done that, or I've not spoken to them in a while, you think like, have you anything to be in your position? Like, don't, just because it's happening now, don't let it affect, your parents. You've only got one set of parents at the end of the day.
You know what? I love what you say there, and it so reminds me of a close friend of mine whose mum was terminally ill for a long time, but sounds horrible, but she wouldn't die. She was like terminally ill, but they thought she was going to last a year, then it was 3 years, then it was 5 years, which is wonderful, but she was very bitter about her illness. And my friend always used to say, I've got to go and see my mum on Friday. So he used to go over to Leicester Royal Infirmary and he'd have to go and see his mum. And I've got to go and see my mum on Friday, got to go and see my mum. And I remember when she eventually passed away, it was a case of, I don't get to go and see my mum. Do you know what I mean? It was that short, subtle shift of, I've got to go and see mum, or I've got to do this, or I've got to pop round and help my dad. Well, you would, I'm sure the day that was no longer the case, it then becomes, I wish I would get to see my dad. I wish I would get to, and we just take it for granted, and it gives you such a unique perspective.
So my dad used to smoke, and obviously because he smoked in the house, I used to get really frustrated at the thought of
when he was ill.
When he was ill, and the house used to smell of cigarettes, and I used to think, I wish he didn't do that, and like I wish it was different. I wish he could go outside. But thinking back now, it's like I shouldn't have thought like that. That's selfish of me, because that's all he could do. Isn't it, really?
Well, so you had to do it for him.
Yeah, that's all. He couldn't go out and smoke, and he couldn't physically pick the cigarette up to put to his mouth, and I just feel guilty in a way because I was so selfish, even though it was him suffering. But you can't change your past. No point dwelling on it.
No. And it's so, I know, obviously this is an audible platform, so for people that can't see it, the way that you smile about it there, and you think back, and it's wonderful that you're able to reflect on that. I mean, Ange, a lot of what we're talking about here is kind of building us up to, and we've referenced it, so I want to go head in and directly ask, how did you all of you, because this was a family affair, turn this into such an incredible positive, which for listeners might sound weird, but I want us to get onto the work of the charity and how it came to exist. You've referenced Stu started doing some charity work, but deciding to start your own is a pretty big challenge. So how did that happen?
Like I say, he picked himself up, he dusted himself off. He wanted something positive to come out of his illness. And that's just the sort of way he was, and that's probably why
he turned every single negative into a positive.
He did turn every negative into a positive. And do you know, I've never known a man be so happy to get a blue badge so he could park anywhere he wanted to. He was absolutely over his blue badge.
He must have still drove around for a time though, being like, "Oh no, we can't park here because we have got a badge." You're just so used to never parking in those places.
Yeah, you would never park in a disabled. I mean, that used to.
Yeah.
But another thing that he really loved was we went to
Alton Towers.
Alton, and because he was in a wheelchair, he couldn't move. He literally sat there, he could not move. But he actually got to the front of the queue, to go. He actually said to everybody, if you want to go on the front of the ride, take me to Alton Towers. I'll come with you.
I was going to say, there must have been a number of those moments where it was just like, you've got to see the humour in some of this stuff, and you're like, Jesus Christ. I'm sure as the disease started taking hold more, you were like, oh, bloody hell, Dad's can't do his thing, or he must have laughed at things himself.
Oh, he absolutely did.
It was good, like when we, not good, but we go on holiday and we get the front of the plane and you get all the extra leg room because obviously he needed it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? You've got to frame it that way, and I'm not remotely surprised that he was doing that because you've got to find the positive.
Yeah, exactly, and like I said, that was the sort of guy he was. And going back to your question, because he started the charity and one thing and another and just wanted to help people, it would have been rude of me not to carry it on. I mean, all of the dice that he's got, we sell sweat T-shirts and it's the logo and everything's fantastic.
The logo's
but on the
really
arm,
good. The logo's really good. I mean, it looks like this must have been thought of when he first got given his number, but I know that was never the case, of course. But it just made the branding was just so damn good, and it's done so well.
Yeah, absolutely, and on the sleeves of everything, he's got established 2015. So in a subtle way, that was his way of saying, I wanted to carry on, sort of thing. In some respects, it can be a bit of a millstone around your neck, because I've got to carry it on. I can't not carry it on. I'm Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police, doing all his things and whatever. But I wouldn't not carry it on.
I know you wouldn't, but people. It is. Let's put that out there, because you're not going to be the only person out there who is running a charity on behalf of a loved one. And this is. Let's just put that out there. Do you know what I mean? Because Stu's been gone a decade. You're
he's 6 years this year. He died in yeah.
And the kids, the kids were really young at the time, and they're going into their careers now. They're going to go on, and maybe, they'll all have lives of their own, families, children. You're not terrible to look at, and you will have a life as well after Stu's passes up. But this is one of those things that. The charity is such an incredible thing, but it is a bit of it's a strange thing to do, because it's so powerful and it's helped so many people.
Yeah, it has. And, I often think because of Stu's legacy and because he's so well known in Melton, most Leicester Mercury, he's always on the police website with one thing or another that he'd done in the past. And recently, because they've named the force training room the Stewart Sparling.
God, I saw the picture of Lewis opening it up. I was like, that's incredible. And it just folds back into the whole, such a great mentor, such a great teacher. Lewis is now doing the whole family proud. Yeah. And it was just a match made in heaven, that was.
Yeah. But doesn't that tell you that 6 years on, but it's called the Stewart Sparling Training Centre, doesn't that tell you that 6 years after, it's 6 years in June, that they're still thinking about him and thinking what a fantastic job he did, what a fantastic officer he was.
Yeah.
And, I want to do this for him. I want to do this for his family of, and don't you think that's actually testament to my husband, my late.
Yeah. Did you ever think that? Because there's so many people that are probably living lives alongside a secret unsung hero, and you've got no idea. It's just so day to day. I mean, Lewis and Caitlin will have been listening to Stu's stories all the time, and what'd you do? Oh, well, I did this. But you don't want to constantly come home and say, I restrained somebody today who was trying to attack their wife. I did this. I met with a youth group today who have been struggling and every single interaction that even Lewis and Caitlin are having now, Lewis is part of the stories. Somebody will go home and the only time they've ever rang 999 will be Lewis turned up or Caitlin turned up. And I always say to people, this is what's so unique about the emergency services. Every day is an opportunity to be part of somebody's story. And I'm sure all the stories come out now where you were like, oh yeah, you know what, I saw Stu once, or I met Stu on this job, or I had to ring 999 and Stu turned up.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like you say, he didn't come home and say, he didn't tell us about the little things that he did, but don't you think, again, it's the respect he had for his, that actually sort of transformed itself onto Lewis, onto Caitlin, whatever, and it's instilled in them that actually it's a good career, and
it's a bloody good job.
People miss it, as in, and they're so negative about the police, and it really breaks my heart. It does. I mean, they get spat at. They get you put this in, but they don't get paid enough for what they do. They need danger money.
They don't. It's so sad, and I think so much about Caitlin. Coming into the job that you're doing now, Caitlin, you've come in at a really strange time, and you've been operational all the way through this really harrowing pandemic. And it seems so sad now that the police, the fire service, we've always been seen as this massive insurance policy. But how have you found your first few years? Just as we sort of pause on your dad's story for a minute. How have you found it coming into this role in such a crazy, crazy time? The NHS has never been so supported, but also never been so essential as it has been now.
Yeah. So I was actually, so when I qualified as a paramedic last year, there wasn't an opening at East Midlands where I wanted to go. So I continued working at West Midlands Ambulance as a student paramedic.
Wow.
So when it first started, I was working as a student over there in Coventry. And then I actually got the chance to go on telly. So there's a program called Paramedics Britain's Lifesavers, and it was all about like students who stepped up to become, because I was just a university student, so I wasn't getting paid or anything like that. And
No.
I stepped up and I volunteered to work as a student, obviously to have more ambulances out on the road and double up the crews and stuff. So yeah, it was a program called Paramedics Britain's Lifesavers. I got filmed a couple of days out on the road. You know, they followed me and they followed my story. And I think because of the story of Dad, how it shaped me to be who I am and what I wanted to do. And they were just drawn to the story, really. So Channel 4, 3-part episode, and I was on the first episode.
Oh, no. What was it like coming straight into the role? I mean, because you've not known the role during peacetime, if that makes sense, without glorifying it too much.
Yeah.
You've come straight in and people staring at you on an ambulance, thinking you've been in 10 or 15 years and you're such a consummate professional, and because of what you've had to go through with your dad, you probably bring such an air of calm and professionalism to the role. What was it like, you know? And I know people will see it when they see the episodes and stuff like that, but what was it like coming straight onto the front line during the pandemic? It must have been crazy.
Yeah, to be honest, I felt like, you know, like they say the one where it's really elegant on top, but underneath it was flattened. It was literally like that.
Yeah.
It was like, wow. Like, obviously working as a student, it's completely different because you've always got a paramedic with you and you've always got someone there. But going out, like when I first went out as a paramedic, it's like, oh gosh, I'm the adult.
I know, like, my brother-in-law's a paramedic and we've had him on the show before, and he said you sort of look over your shoulder and you're like, oh no, it's me. I'm the person, I'm going to make all the decisions, and everyone's staring at you like, what do we need to do, paramedic person? And you're like, I don't know, we're going to do this, and I'll say it really confidently and hope everybody thinks it's the right decision. And you guys, and it's the same for you and your brother. I always say this about the fire services. We're kind of, it's a bit harsh because there's at least 4 of us there. Do you know what I mean? we're always part of a team, but you and you're but at best you're going to have 2 of you there, and usually one of you, with all due respect, is the driver or the EMT. Pretty much all resting on your shoulders. That must have been crazy, especially during this time.
It was crazy, and it was a lot of pressure. So I'm only 21, and it's just a lot of pressure, and like a lot of colleagues that I've worked with have been in the service for years, and even though they're technicians, they're still probably they've obviously got more experience than me, and the knowledge is probably better than mine. And it's still like, if anything major was to happen, it all falls on me. Like I'm the one paramedic on my shoulder, and it's like, bloody hell, like, oh my God, like.
Because I've had this where during this time we've had new recruits trying to learn the role, and you're just becoming operational alone at any time in the last 50 years has been a really challenging time. You're trying to stay up to date on all your procedures, but it's like the game changes every 2 days. You turn up on shift and they're like, just get your kit and get on the rig, and we'll tell you what's happening as we get there. And I'm a crew commander in my role, and I'm like, people look to you, and as I'm sure they look to you, and expect to know. They think that you're the oracle of the emergency services. You must go out there, and they're like, oh, thank God the paramedic's here. She must know all of the most up-to-date stuff because she's like, she's got the pulse. She's just been on the phone with the Prime Minister. Like they think you know what's going on, and you're like, we're just doing the best we can every day. We're kind of making it up as we go along, with all due respect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm my job. Like, I've done the training for 3 years, and I know what I'm doing, but it's still that thought in your head, like, oh, what if this happens, or what if I don't know what to do? But it's just human, isn't it? At the end of the day, there's all people higher than you on a phone call away, and it's petrifying.
One of the first jobs that when I speak about first-time paramedics, I think like the 4th job he went on was a baby. And he said, I'd been working with people that have worked for like 10 years and they'd never delivered a baby. And I think he did like 3 in his first 6 months. And apparently there's only, and you'll tell me, I'm sure I'll be wrong, but he says there's only like 2 or 3 days that you do on delivering a baby in the paramedic training. There's not a lot. How long do you train for to deliver a baby? It's not long, is it?
I think we had like 1 day session, like a PowerPoint, and it's like, obviously it's not enough, but when I was a student I delivered 4 babies.
Did you? Oh my God. Yeah. It's so much more common. I thought that was weird, delivering 4 babies as a student paramedic. Jesus, must be crazy.
I know. I was lucky because I had other paramedics around me, but I think now when I'm delivering one, I'd be like, oh no, like, please pray nothing goes wrong.
Yeah.
But you have the training for it, and I
still think it's crazy. So, Lewis, I wanted to touch back because we obviously spoke about your dad's training centre opening up and stuff like that. Now, with all due respect to your sister, yours is really a kind of a unique position because you've been in the service a while now, you've established yourself as a competent officer, but there's always that, oh yeah, I knew your dad. Your dad was amazing, your dad was this, your dad was that. But also, you know what? I'm my own person. I'm pretty good at what I'm doing. I'm not under anybody's shadow. I am who I am. Has that, and you never want to seem ungrateful. You never want to be like, oh no, forget about my dad. I'm a police officer in my own right. But that must have been a very difficult challenge.
It was. I will admit, I struggled, not massively, I struggled quite a bit when I first joined the job, mainly because having his collar number, it was a massive weight on my shoulders because,
Did you want it?
Everyone.
Did you want the number? It's a weird one.
I was a bit unsure.
Yeah.
It is, because he was such a well-respected officer. As you know, the things could go wrong in a job for an individual. And I always had to my mind, one, it was my dad's collar number, and it was, when he died, it was retired, so no one could have it ever again.
Yeah.
And then the constable, Mr. Simon Cole, unretired it to me, just me, and it's such an amazing moment, and it's just a sense of achievement for me, really, to carry that. But at the same time, it was that, something went wrong, and because of the charity, which is the Treble One Trust, it would reflect badly on.
Yeah, and it can be for so. We all know stories of a wonderful police officer who's just been in a bad situation. Someone's made some incorrect or erroneous accusation, and you would never want that to be a case. And, because you could go through 2-3 years of a court case and everything goes, oh no, it was actually nothing to report. It was just, and then it would have been dragged through the mud. There's always that sort of looming over your head, isn't there?
There is. It was a big, not a burden. It was a big thing to take on. But at the end of the day, I'm so happy that I did it now because, I'll go to custody or I'll just be somewhere and someone will be like, oh, what's your collar number? And I'll say, oh, Treble One. And they'll be like, oh, you Stu Sparling's lad. And I don't think anyone would come up to me and say, oh, your dad was a bit of an arsehole, he's done this and that. But I've never had that. Do you know what I mean? So every single person that's come up to me has said nice things about him, and it's just amazing to hear. Like, goes back to what my mum was saying 5-6 years on, and I still get it now. Oh, you Stu's lad, and yeah, I'm lucky because people knew the number, people knew my dad, and I've sort of been accepted into his shoes a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm still my own person, as you say.
Of course you are, yeah.
I've still made my own legacy, and I will continue to make my own legacy. But it's nice to just have that and have my dad on my shoulder, sort of thing.
What does Lewis's career look like? Not to get into this isn't it's not a management review meeting or anything like that, but you're so early into your career. I'm sure if Stu, if your dad had looked back on his career, he'd have had no idea where it would have led him and how it would have ended. But the police is a very different place now than it was when your dad joined. And how do you see the job? Because there's so many more factors to the role than there ever has been. The communities are so much more complex. There's so much more work that you're expected to do, and like your mum rightly referred to, you're not given the respect that perhaps, with all due respect to your dad, I wonder if it's kind of a harder job now than it ever has been, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a lot harder now. We have to deal with a lot more now than we did. One of them being mental health. It's such a big thing nowadays. Obviously, it's not a problem. My sister suffered with it. I suffered with it after my dad died. So you can relate, but we're almost having to now be like mental health professionals as well as police officers as well as paramedics. We're expected to cover such a wide variety of skills, which we do get trained on.
Yeah.
But, some of them you deal with more than others. Others you might not deal with, for years. And it's strange, but it is a lot different now to when it was, when my dad in the day, because now you've got video cameras, you've got social media.
And it's all there.
I'm sure you've seen it.
Videos and stuff are there to protect us, but it also you feel like it's I feel it. It feels like it stops us doing our job sometimes. The things that we know to be right and the things that we want to help the community with, but you don't want to ever look like you did preferred treatment or you're not treating people how they quote unquote deserve to be treated. But that must be the hardest part. And obviously now your dad's had his name attached to this training centre. There's kind of like you're in a strange place now where you see new people coming into the service. What does the police service look like on a day-to-day basis now, and would you still make the same decision to join again?
For me, I would still make the same decision to join again. My dad always said, when I was looking at joining the job, and I was, I made my mind up, he'd been in for 20 years, and he said, from when he first joined in the last 20 years, the job has changed so much, unbelievable amounts. Well, that's just because it's just, trying to keep up with society, technology, and things like that. But I would still join. Absolutely, you just get such a good feeling, when you really have helped someone, as I'm sure you do, and paramedics, etc. When you really help someone, and just to get that. I just can't get my words out. It's just you just get such a good feeling. It's not all the time.
It's a vocation, isn't it? You have to want to do it, otherwise it's going to be so hard. And I wanted to. We've spoken in and around the charity so much, but people are going to fall head over heels in love with it. Perhaps they've never learned anything about it, but I want people to get a real appreciation for how they can get involved with it, because you've done some pretty cool stuff. The charity's been going a while now. What are some of the fondest memories of some of the projects you've been involved in?
Well, me, myself and I have done mudder challenges, 12 all tough mudders. My daughter, she's done 3 tough mudders.
Jesus.
Oh, 4, telling me now. A tough, what a tough mudder challenge is. We've had, football matches with the Leicester Legends. That was always arranged by Ian McGrath, who was Stuart's best friend and also a colleague. An amazing man, and Ian and his wife, Tracy, helped us so much. And when Stu was, sometimes I think we've done everything, and other people have done lots of things. A chief superintendent, Stu Pryor, he went to the top of Everest.
Jesus.
Went to the summit, and he did that for the Treble One.
That's a pretty amazing one.
Oh yeah. There's a big obstacle.
Inflatable obstacle course. Sorry, there's an inflatable obstacle.
She doesn't know what she's on about, Lewis. For God's sake, take it off her.
There was a newsletter onward, so the area that I work, regarding charity work. And the chosen charity was the Treble One Trust, and there's an inflatable obstacle course in September. I think it's somewhere in Nottingham.
Okay.
A load of us, including myself, and a load of other colleagues that are running, so you can do 5K, 10K or 15K.
Is that September this year?
Yeah, I think it's September the 11th it is.
September the 11th.
It's to raise money that one of my colleagues, she's been brilliant, she set up a GoFundMe page, which is linked to the Treble One Trust.
Oh, wow.
So, people that want to donate it.
We'll stick that in the notes, because what I want to do is be able for people to, because they'll have been captivated by this. Where's the best place people to go to find out more information? Because obviously they can hit the GoFundMe page, but I know you guys have got your own platforms as well.
There's a Treble One Trust website. I can't remember what the actual link is, but if you just obviously go into Google and put
stick it in the show notes, people will see it below.
Yeah, Treble One Trust, it'll come up on the website. We've got a Facebook page, Twitter page, like that, and they're regularly kept updated with the events that we've got going on, albeit because of COVID, we've obviously not really done any the last sort of year.
It's been so challenging. Well, I was blown away that you're actually being able to try and put one together for September. The way everything's looking, it looks like September is going to be able to work for people, though, because I found a lot of people through this pandemic, with charity work especially, it's been so difficult just to be able to get people involved. Not because people don't want to, it's just because it's so damn hard.
It has. Obviously, they stopped all of the big groups meeting and things like that, and big events. So it will be nice as the restrictions start to ease.
Cool.
It will be nice to start more fundraising.
So people can head over to the website, because I know I got one of the hoodies not so long ago and I absolutely love it. That's one of the things that I think people will really enjoy going to anyway. So there's there's on the website. We've got this coming up in September.
I just want to say that, any fundraising anybody would like to do, no matter how small, it will really help an MND sufferer. And we only cover Leicestershire and Rutland simply because, we can't be national, or nobody, they wouldn't get, the donations that they require to get the equipment they require. I mean, I've made quite a few donations this year, and really, we just really want to keep it going. And
Lewis tells me that when the restrictions lift, you're going to do a marathon carrying a freezer. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Really? For me, very good for me. But yeah,
now you know what? In all seriousness, and I'll put this on there because I've got something that I want to do. And I'd love to speak to Lewis and maybe even Caitlin about it as well. Last year, I did an ambulance pull for the NHS. It was like, was it 16, 78 or something like that? There was an event last year, wasn't there? The NHS had been going for a number of years. I don't know what it was. And we said, it started in
75. It's 75, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was something like that. And I pulled an ambulance for just over a mile, and we raised a load of money to do it. But I wanted to do it for a marathon.
I can't pull hell for them.
I want to do it for a marathon, so I want to get like a police car or an ambulance or something like that. And there's something, and I'll probably will edit this bit out, but there's something really cool, and I want you guys to think about how we could do it if you're interested. There's something awesome about like having a member of the police service, a member of the ambulance service. It hasn't got to be either of you necessarily, but if you're up for it, we can try and do it. And pulling an emergency vehicle of some form. They're not that heavy, honestly. When you get pulling them together, they're not very heavy. We're not going to do a fire engine because fire engines are big. And I'm a pretty strong guy, so don't worry. I'll do most of the pulling. But I think it'd just be amazing if we could have a member of each emergency services and do something like that. Or doing it like around a race course, somewhere where you can do it over 24 hours, nobody will bother us. And probably if we pulled something like a police car, because we could do it for Treble One and pull it, and that'd be really easy. Not easy, but like it'd be a lot easier than a bloody fire engine, that's for sure. Because they're only, it's a normal vehicle, isn't it? Have a think about it, because I think we could raise a lot of money doing it. We could frame it in some way, like, I don't know, we could come up with something cool about, a marathon, do you know what I mean? But there'd be a cool way of framing it as like saying it's a marathon event to do something, I don't know. But think about it, because I think you'd do it.
Mum will email the Chief Constable, Mr. Cole, about, because he's big with fundraising, he has had a lot to do with the Treble One.
Yeah.
And he thinks of the Treble One. So yeah, we can try and get something sorted.
We could do that, and they could use it they can do recruitment off the back of it. They can do all sorts of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And they can get one of their nice flashy new vehicles and we can pull that. And it'd be a right laugh. I think it'd get some great exposure. And I say we can do it on a secluded airfield somewhere and just do the same 1 mile lap 26 times or something.
Yeah, I think Mr. Cole would do that himself, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fitness cycling and stuff. I bet he'd like that.
Stuff like that would be great, and it'd be a great opportunity. We wouldn't want like 10 or 15 people because then it'd make it sound too easy. But as long as we had, I'm happy to do it from the fire service perspective because some of them are grumpy buggers. They don't like doing really hard things. But yeah, if we had 1 or 2 people from each, then that'd be cool. It'd be really good.
I think there'd be a couple of people in the police that'd be up for doing that. And the ambulance service.
Yeah. We'd get some.
It's just, we don't really talk about this sort of thing often. As you can tell, I got a bit upset earlier. And it is nice to share the story with people.
It is, man.
Yeah, we're always happy to talk about it. It's just, like I say, 6 years on and people are still interested in this story. And it means the world to us. It really does. Me, my mum and my sister.
Love it. I'm so glad we got this opportunity to get that time together. So we'll get our heads together soon, and we'll get some sort of marathon challenge under wraps, and people will have to listen out to future episodes to hear what it's going to look like.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get court comms or something on the police intranet. So officers, I'm sure there's a couple of big officers that would be up for it. I think in the job.
If we're pulling like an ambulance, can we have like someone discreetly sat in there, like on the gas? Because I won't be able to.
We'll put an Avengers team together. Don't worry. We'll have a great team doing it.
Yeah. A tough mudder, Caitlin. You can do that 4 times. You can do anything. Yeah. Well, still did it.
There you go. You see.
Well, yeah, that sounds good. We'll definitely look into that and get something sorted.
Thank you so much for your interest. It's really appreciated. And as I said, we apologise for it taking so long.
Hey, good things are worth waiting for, Angie. You know that.
Well, they're absolutely right. You really are absolutely right. And you're an amazing man doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve.
We really appreciate it.
And Caitlin, Lewis, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. I love being able to be part of sharing this incredible story. So I can't wait to see what happens in the future, and when lockdown gets a bit easier, we'll all get together and have some fajitas or something and talk about the next challenge to come.
Gin.
We'll have some gin, yeah. We'll have some gin as well, Ange, don't worry.
I'm partying with Simon at our house. Have a few.
We'll get Simon involved, don't worry. We'll get him involved.
Yeah.
Should we try and stop him? Try and stop him. Anytime there's an event going on, he just shows up, bless him.
Oh, he's amazing, isn't it? We love him.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
He really is, yeah.
Beautiful. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for your time. Lots and lots of love, and I look forward to speaking with you soon, all right?
Brilliant. Take care, buddy.
Bye.
See you, bye. Man, I love that chat. That's got to be one of my favourite ones. I always love it when we have a couple of people on the podcast because it makes for such a rich and interesting conversation, but especially when there's such 3 lovely people like Angie, Caitlin and Lewis. Honestly, felt all warm inside, even listening back to it. Such an emotional roller coaster. In all seriousness, I want to thank Angie from the bottom of my heart for what is just, God, I can't even, for somebody that runs a podcast, words cannot do justice to what this woman has had to go through and how she supported her community, supported her husband as he went through this, and now supporting her children as they go on to live their own lives. And also for Lewis, wow, we spoke about how his dad set such a great example, but now how there's that expectation as well as Lewis steps into his own career. He shared some massive things there, and I really want to thank him for being so open. Caitlin completely blew me away with her openness to share some of the challenges she's gone through with her mental health. And I know she is not alone in this, and I know so many people who struggle every single day with a challenge that is not visible, wrestling a demon that you can't see. So how confident she was to share that is so powerful for me, and I don't want us to skip over that because it's something that can be so debilitating for men and women all over the country, all over the world. Mental health is something that you can't see, but can cost us so much. So thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that. And of course, while the four of us had an absolute blast, my biggest thank you, of course, goes to you, the listener. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. Yeah, I know, you're kind of checking yourself out going, is he talking to me? Yes, I'm talking to you. You have given up an hour and a half probably of your time listening to Angie, Caitlin, Lewis, and the guy that seems to talk more than anybody else, that's me. The fact you've spent this time with us really means a lot to me. I do not take your time for granted. I work hard every single day to try and find more of these incredible people, hunt them out and share their stories with you. The story of the Sparling family really is that of the emergency services family. It's a story of tragedy. It's a story of heroism. It's a story of bravery. It's the comeback story. It's the story of rising from the ashes. And as Stewart would say, it's the story of getting a positive out of a negative. So thanks for coming back. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for touching base. And thank you for taking time out of your busy life to be here with us on the Firefighters Podcast. I look forward to seeing you soon, but until then, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and we will see you real soon right here on the Firefighters Podcast.